This edition of the Tim Walz Crime Report is a little bit different. This isn't about crimes committed under Tim Walz, but rather crimes for which Tim Walz is responsible. The Tim Walz administration and the Department of Education allowed the largest fraud of federal COVID dollars in the country to occur in the state of Minnesota, resulting in at least $250 million of taxpayer money to be fraudulently used. Taxpayer money. That's your money. That's not money that grows on trees. That's your money. U.S. District Attorney Andy Lugar has so far indicted 49 individuals, with more coming, in what he calls a pay-to-play scheme. Some of those who perpetrated and benefited from the fraud have been proven to donate to DFL candidates. According to local Twin Cities media, Governor Tim Walz initially indicated he knew about the Feeding Our Future fraud due to a, quote, verbal briefing about, quote, suspicious activity in the program in late April or early March of 2020. According to Walz, he first learned of it, quote, very early in the program, unquote. At this point, Tim Walz and the Minnesota Department of Education were required to notify the OLA, that's the Office of the Legislative Auditor, of the suspicious activity, as there was clearly a reason to suspect that public money or other public resources may have been used for an unlawful purpose. Tim Walz did not notify the OLA at this time, thus breaking the law if he knew of the fraud at this point. In summer of 2020, after initially claiming he became aware of the fraud in April or May of 2020, a spokesperson for Walz claimed the governor, quote, misspoke, and that he actually found out when MDE staff reached out to the USDA Midwest Regional Office seeking advice and support. According to local media, MDE first reached out to officials at the U.S. Department of Agriculture with concerns about the nonprofit's rapid growth in the summer of 2020. Tim Walz did not notify the OLA at this time, thus breaking the law if he knew of the fraud at this point. November 2020. Walz's spokesperson then followed up with local media, correcting the record for a third time, now stating that Walz became aware of the Feeding Our Future fraud, quote, after Feeding Our Future filed a lawsuit in November 2020. According to a letter from Legislative Auditor Judy Randall, the Office of the Legislative Auditor, OLA, has no record that the Minnesota Department of Education, MDE, or Governor Walz notified at OLA about the potential misuse of public money. With no evidence of MDE nor Governor Tim Walz notifying the OLA of the fraud, the only conclusion that can be reached is that Tim Walz and his Minnesota Department of Education broke the law. Now we have hard evidence that Tim Walz himself broke state law in his handling of the Feed Our Future scandal.